On the Celluloid Mirror, we usually take two films and look at what they reflect about each other, the audience, and our culture at large. But today, we are going to do that with more than two films, because this is a very special episode on which we're going to share and compare our respective top 5 films of 2022 so far.
I mean, what do you think? You think they stand a chance? Well, you're on their side, aren't you? Who are you betting on,
Magic mirror on the wall. Who is the fairest one of all?
Look at these lies.
One shall stand, one shall fall.
Even if one of them survives,
the only way to stop him is to make another movie.
Welcome to the Celluloid Mirror. I am one of your hosts, Nicole Solomon.
And I am another host, Sean Mannion. On the Celluloid Mirror, we take two films and look at what they reflect about each other, the audience, and our culture at large. But today, we are not doing that. We were going to record an episode today on which we were planning to do exactly that, but then I went and got COVID, and I was not able to research and prepare for that episode as thoroughly as we wanted to, or we were not able to. So instead, we're going to shake things up a bit, and we're going to compare and contrast our favorite films of 2022 so far as of now, which is June 25th, 2022, which is the recording date for this episode. These are our top 5.
We will start by sharing our respective 5th favorite films of the year and chat about those, and then we will move on to our respective 4th favorite films and so on. Luckily, there were some good films this year, so we both have...
There have been a few, yes.
Yeah, we both got some stuff I think we're really excited to discuss. So should we just get into discussing it, Sean?
We should. What was your 5th favorite film of 2022 so far?
Okay, don't disqualify me for this, Sean, but I may have broken our non-existent rules for this this very special episode, because my 5th place is a tie. And half of the tie, I'm not sure qualifies as a film, because
I'm going to let it slide. Now, I'm going to let it slide for one reason.
That you don't have an alternative?
No, because the TIE Fighter is my favorite Star Wars ship, so ties are okay with me. Anyway, continue to tell me about the thing.
You, that was surprising. I was going to say you never fail to surprise me, but that's really not true. I would say you actually rarely surprise me, but that was one moment in which you did. So my 5th favorite of the year, I'm going to say, is a tie between Joel Kim Booster's Fire Island, the Jane Austen inspired rom-com that takes place on the titular Fire Island. It was great. There's been a lot written and said about that. As somebody who, as I have entered midlife, one could say, suddenly I enjoy rom-coms now. And I've been actually catching up on a lot of like classic rom-coms that I missed, like 27 Dresses or whatever, stuff I never watched because when it came out, I was like, I don't want to watch that. But now I do want to watch that. I find rom-coms very enjoyable, and I think that this is definitely one of the best done I've seen ever. It's obviously nice that it's a gay rom-com that's mostly about men of color for a change, but also just the script, the direction, the acting, just on a filmmaking level, as far as rom-coms go, it's a particularly good one. And love the cast, love the crew, love Joel Kim Booster and Bowen Yang, who play the two main characters. And I also really, really, really love Conrad Ricamora, who plays one of the love interests. I saw him play Seymour in Little Shop of Horrors on Broadway before Broadway removed their rules that said you had to wear masks in the theater. So I'm probably not going to go to a Broadway show for a while, because I'm not trying to get COVID for a second time, or at least I'm trying to delay when I do get COVID for a second time. So in any event, I'm very glad I got to see the excellent Conrad Ricamora on stage in his just fantastic performance as Seymour when I could. And I really like what he does in Fire Island. It's kind of hard to explain, but he plays a character. You haven't seen it, right, Sean?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
No.
He plays a character who's kind of stiff in various ways and withdrawn, but also extremely hot but also very awkward. And how he plays that felt very, very, very true to life in a way that I haven't really seen someone play the awkward love interest character before. I thought it was actually a really distinct and very good performance, and I'm hoping to see a lot more from him. And then the other half of my number 5 position goes to the thing that's arguably not a movie, which is W. Kamau Bell's We Need to Talk About Cosby 4-part documentary. I'm counting it as a movie because it screened at Sundance, and, you can take it as a big-ass 4-hour-long movie if you want, so that's why I'm putting it here. I thought W. Kamau Bell did an excellent job just delving very deeply into a very difficult and complicated subject, and talking about both Cosby, it's about talking about Bill Cosby, about the entirety of his career, including positive historic things he does. The film does not shy away from any of that, but in fact, delves into that deeply as important context for when we talk about the many, 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 many women he raped or otherwise assaulted, some of whom speak in this documentary about their experiences with him, as well as other comedians. And it's a great documentary about a difficult subject. And, I grew up on Cosby. The documentary made me remember ways Cosby was a part of my day-to-day life as a kid that I didn't even remember. I used to watch picture pages obsessively. I don't know if you ever saw that. I think all so, these I loved picture pages. There was this thing you could order where you could order, I think, basically a piece of saran wrap you could put over your TV. So then with a marker, you could do picture pages with Bill Cosby, something like that. Anyway, it's this is a figure that has impacted everybody in this country, honestly, whether they watch the show or not. And for a lot of us, he was America's dad. He was the image of, the benevolent, loving patriarch. Obviously, I'm clearly not Black, so I don't think my personal my personal tale of Cosby is the most among the most important to center right now, but I think it does speak to how incredibly widespread his just import was. I still have cassette tapes from when I was a kid that have Bill Cosby stand-up routines recorded on them that I taped off the radio, including, I think, the Spanish Fly one, which they talk about a lot in the documentary, and hearing bits of it, even though I'd been reading people talking about that bit for years now. And I hadn't listened to it myself in some decades, but actually hearing it again, I was oh shit, I remember being a teenager and just listening to this. And not even, I think I thought it was a little weird, but not, I didn't think it was as rapey as it clearly is. But anyway, I highly recommend We Need to Talk About Cosby. It's on Showtime right now. I think they still have a 30-day free trial if you don't have Showtime and want to watch it. Sean, what was your 5th favorite film of the year?
Well, I did want to say, I think it's fair with a lot of these things that get serialized like that to just count it as a movie, because in the end, a lot of them should have just been a movie. I'm sure that one, I haven't watched it yet, but I'm not sure how I feel about watching it yet because of my feelings about the Cosby thing. I'm just I don't know how much I can interface right now still. But so many of those, there's all these documentary series, or like honestly, like every Marvel and most of the Star Wars series could have just been a movie. Like I just finished Obi-Wan Kenobi this week. That really could have just been a movie.
This needed to be the length it was, like, in order to do justice to the subject and the breadth of it, and not give short shrift to things that I think were really important to cover. It needed to be this long, but I think it's like it got broken up into a 4-part docu-series because that's going to be more marketable than a 4-hour long movie. But this is not something that should have been cut down, actually. Okay. But I agree with you that most things, most of these, most docu-series I see should have been a documentary. Yeah.
So my fifth favorite was Turning Red, the Pixar movie about 13-year-old girl named Mei Lin who turns into a giant red panda whenever she gets too excited or angry or agitated, whatever. She's kind of like the Hulk, but adorable. She's like an adorable version of the Hulk. We saw it, I think, the weekend that it came out on Disney Plus earlier this year, and it was it's a lot of fun. It's a really cute movie, but it's also, I feel like we usually watch most of, if not all of, actually I think we've watched all of like the things that Pixar releases. My wife's really into them. And honestly, they're like the last like 4 or 5 that we've watched, it's the only one where I'm like, oh, this is good, in the same way that I really like connected with and appreciated some of the other past Pixar ones, you know, like What Makes Monsters Inc. or Toy Story, or some of those things like Inside Out, which I didn't like as much, but still, like, all those, is that I think where they've been really successful is where they really dig into like just shared fundamental experiences and tell a fantastic story around them. You know, it's and this one is just really about how we change as we get older, particularly as teenagers. And, you know, there's a very direct like line from the storyline in this movie to, you know, a girl getting her first period or something like that. Like, but even so, like, that's the most direct way you can kind of translate this. But I think it really does translate to like how relationships between parents and children shift as children kind of start that path towards adulthood. And I think they did a really good job with it without being overbearing with it. It's not like a perfect movie or anything like that, but the main character also has a delightful like friend group around her. It's a period film. It takes place in 2002, I think, in Canada. And it managed to do a really good job of being like a movie that takes place in that late 90s, very beginning of the 2000s, that has the right feel for it, but didn't feel like it was just like, it didn't feel like that was like it was just trying to ride nostalgia at all. In fact, like it added to the story, but it didn't dominate the story. It wasn't something that was distracting. Like there was like the Tamagotchi thing, which, you know, I'm sure kids today probably are just like, what is that? But, you know, those were fun, but it didn't dominate the story. So I appreciated that. It's nice to see more films being made sort of about that era, or centering kind of some of that era, just because that's part of when I was young. I mean, I wasn't that young back in 2002. I was like 19, but still. So yeah, just a sweet, fun movie. And I felt like, especially after the last handful of stuff from Pixar, like a real kind of return to better stories, because I really like plenty of the other ones that have come out in the last couple of years are fine, or not even the last couple of years, in the last like year and a half.
Some of them aren't even really fine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to get into it too much, but you know, Encanto was fine. Luca was fine.
I liked those two.
Yeah, they were fine.
I liked Seeing Red a lot more.
Yeah. Or Turning Red.
Turning Red. See, this is my problem. I am incapable of calling this fucking movie by the correct name.
That's okay.
This is beyond this episode. I've been calling it Seeing Red, like, to other people a lot, and people always know what I mean. And some of them don't even know I'm wrong about the name. But my brain has just decided that my mouth will not say the word turning in the title of this film. And I apologize for that, listeners. But yeah, I thought Turning Red was great. It's hovering right under my top 5. Like, it was definitely in my top 5 of the year so far, earlier in the year. And my sister's kids like it too. So hopefully one of these days they'll want to watch that with me instead of some of the other stuff they want to watch with me. But you know, it's fine. I don't want to even try to pretend to draw connections between Turning Red, We Need to Talk About Cosby, and Fire Island. These are all very different films.
more than a little bit. I think that, well, I mean, Fire Island's about a group of friends, right? It's isn't it? Somewhat?
Yes.
There you go.
And We Need to Talk About Cosby is not.
Well, I'm not going there. But Turning Red is about a group of friends. So there's a connection there.
That's true. Turning Red and Fire Island are both about
groups of friends and changes, romantic comedies. They're all about changes in romance. There's a little bit of, is there romance in Turning Red? Not exactly.
They're all films that address taboos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Including some that shouldn't be taboos. Some taboos I think are good and helpful to a society, and some should not be there.
Yeah.
Like talking about menstruation, for example, should not be taboo. And yet lots of people
thing.
got big mad at Turning Red.
Oh my God, they got
Why did my child have to hear the word period? Why did my child have to see like an animated drawing of like a tampon box for half a second?
Yeah.
In my house, I keep my tampons under lock and key so that my beautiful son will never have to see them.
So fucking stupid. And then you get all these stories on I'll occasionally see, not on Reddit directly, but like when I'm scrolling TikTok, like these stories that are read where it's like, what's something really stupid somebody did, and like half of them, if women get involved in the conversation, like half of them are about my boyfriend not understanding periods. And I'm just like, how did
we know how?
I mean, I know how.
Gutting public education is part of it.
Well, gutting public education is part of it, but I didn't need public education to help me with that because my mother talked about it plenty. Or made a point about it. So, but yeah, and also I actually missed health class because moving during that time, because when I was in 7th grade, they didn't do the health class in 7th grade. It was for 8th grade, and I moved out of country in 8th grade, and where I moved, they did the health class in 9th grade. And then I moved back to the U.S.
So this is why you don't understand where babies come from.
I don't care where babies come from. I don't like them, and I don't want to be around them.
Yeah. I in case our listeners haven't clocked this, we did say the recording date. This recording date also happens to be the very day after the Supreme Court, as expected, struck down Roe versus Wade. So it's a day when I'm extra uncharmed by cis men thinking the just completely factually incorrect things that they think about various organs and how they work.
Yeah, no, people who can't even have a conversation about that stuff not only shouldn't be legislating or anywhere near like in judgment of stuff like that, like they shouldn't have those jobs in the first place.
They shouldn't be alive in the first place. Let's be real. They're sucking up a whole lot of oxygen that we need for other stuff.
Listen, I'm not saying that dead judges can't make decisions.
I am, however, saying that I did recently rewatch The Pelican Brief. I don't know if you remember the plot of that.
We watched it recently, I think, or I was gonna rewatch it recently because I enjoy those 90s thrillers, but I can't remember the details. Like I can never remember the details of that movie.
Look it up later. I'm not mentioning it for any reason. It has nothing to do with current events at all. But yeah, so that's listeners. Check out The Pelican Brief. Denzel and Julia in fine form. I think it's still on HBO Max.
At both of their sort of, I don't want to say peaks, but like definitely in that peak era for both of them.
It really was. And this also is reminding me that I was watching like Alan Pakula thrillers for a while and then kind of fell off it. And maybe I should get back on it because they were all super exciting. And I can't wait until Consenting Adults is streaming for free somewhere because I don't want to pay for that. But I do want to watch that. I don't know if you remember Consenting Adults, Sean.
No, I don't think. I remember the title, but I don't remember the movie at all.
It's like a 90s. I remember the poster really well. It looks like all those, so many 90s posters did at least, where it's like black background and it's like the actors with like the light coming on them. So they're like half in shadow and it's like Kevin Kline clutching his wife played by I don't know, Ann Archer or something. I don't know who's playing her. Madeline Stowe, somebody. And I just remember Kevin Kline's in it and he's like looking very concerned. I think it's about like a couple who there are some swingers next door.
Oh, okay.
But I'm like, it is not well reviewed, but I need to see this.
Yeah,
I need to see this immediately.
That sounds like a very Nicole movie.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? What was your fourth favorite film of the year, Sean?
My fourth favorite film, and I know that this one is going to shift before the end of the year because it almost shifted like this week, is The Batman. And I say that because I rewatched it and I didn't enjoy it as much the second time, but I didn't dislike it and I still don't dislike it. I was not expecting, I honestly wasn't expecting to even watch this film.
You were way more down on it than I even was. You were just like, fuck this movie. Like
it did, like the trailers were so like, I'm like, I fucking saw this movie already. I saw like all the Christopher Nolan ones. This just looks like another Christopher Nolan Batman movie. I don't want to fucking see that again. I don't need that in my life. But then everybody was saying such positive things and it was doing so well. And I was like, I'd taken a day off and I was like, screw it. I'll go see it with my Alamo Pass thing. And I enjoyed it. And I think like as somebody who broadly speaking, like enjoys like the Batman universe of characters, like Batman himself, I think is problematic and I have issues, but like, I like the weirdness of the Batman stories. I like when they're a detective story. This was a detective story. It had a much more cohesive feel to the world and to the city that they made to it, which I enjoyed, because one of the problems that I did have with those Christopher Nolan movies is that Gotham City, because it was shot in like 5 different places, had no cohesive feel to it, had no cohesive look to it. And it really should. Like it's not supposed to be a real city. It's supposed to be this heightened
Batman
weird
and Robin's
place.
version.
Yeah. Like I love that. Like honestly, like whether it's the Tim Burton movies or the Joel Schumacher movies, those like heightened like versions of Gotham City are what I enjoy. And this is a more quote grounded version of it, but it's still more cohesive. Like it has like it feels like the same place. And so I enjoyed that. Pattinson was fine. Like he was like, honestly, Batman's not a hard character to play. Like I'm pretty sure any basic acting student could do it. Not to be, too dismissive, but it's not a hard role to play. Paul Dano was pretty good in what he was doing. And like everybody was pretty good. It was maybe a little bit long.
Maybe.
Yeah, it was maybe a little bit long. But it filled it, like it didn't feel like it was long because there was just like one plot point was being stretched out too far or anything like that. There was a lot of plot points. There was a lot of subplot. There was a lot of things that were going on in the movie. So I know when I watched it in the theater, I didn't feel like it was that long because I was like, oh, and these parts are evolving. And as somebody who's into, that world, like it had a lot of little layers to that world, a lot of little things that were like a wink. I'm always going to enjoy the wink and nod to the fan servicey stuff. Like there's at this club, there's these twins, and I'm like, I wonder if those are supposed to be sort of a modern-ish version of Tweedledee and Tweedledum, which are like obscure, never really touched on Alice in Wonderland themed, like Batman characters. Like they're super like low down, and I looked it up and they are, and I was like, okay, cool. They did like little things here and there, and Colin Farrell does a good job as the Penguin character. And I think the thing that ultimately, like, I still really appreciated in the end is that what the character learns, he actually has sort of an arc where he has some growth. It's that if he goes around and is just all broody and it's just the I am vengeance, blah, 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 throughout it, that leads to the wrong sort of thing. Like he's inspiring people to hurt other people that they think should be treated the way that he treats these folks. But instead he kind of learns that, oh no, I have to be seen helping people. That's the thing that I need to be seen doing. People need to know, people need somebody to help them. They don't need somebody to like hurt these other people. And that being the lesson that the character is supposed to be taking away at the end, and he seems to be taking away at the end, I really appreciated, was not expecting, really. And really is the thing that, at the very least, for me, for that sort of film, puts it above like the Nolan films. So
yeah, this is not in my top 5 and isn't close, but I agree with almost at least everything you just said. And the only things I don't agree with are just, it's not that I disagree, it's just that I'm like not as big a Batman fan, so I'm not picking up on and appreciating some of the layers that I think you find rewarding in this, which makes sense. But I mean, I agree with everything else you said, and I thought there were things in it I really liked. Jeffrey Wright was the big standout for me.
Oh yeah, he's fantastic.
Just MVP in the cast. I can't tell you how much I feel like I would not have had any patience for the Lieutenant Gordon character if it wasn't being played by Jeffrey Wright or somebody else who is really bringing something to it and making them feel like a full character. Like, yeah. I don't hate this movie. I'm a Robert Pattinson fan. I don't think this role shows him off like to his best effect. I think he's a lot better in films where he gets to be kind of funny and things like that. Like, I'm definitely not a fan of Tenet. I like the Batman more than I like Tenet, but I like Robert Pattinson in Tenet better than I like Robert Pattinson in the Batman, because he was just such a nice breath of fresh air in that fucking airless movie. But yeah, this, Zoe Kravitz is good. I also liked Paul Dano. I just, it just, for me, it wasn't enough.
Yeah.
To make it, because I'm just like, I would rather see not a Batman movie. Or if I'm going to see a Batman movie, I would want it to go further and be more like The Last Jedi type thing, where it's like a real subversion of the material in some way. And this isn't a subversion of it, but I do agree. Like, I agree with you that the ending was, I was happy, or if not happy, I was pleased. I thought that was a better ending. I think I like The Dark Knight more than you do, but I definitely think this was at least the best live action Batman movie since The Dark Knight. And I definitely think it's better than the other two Nolans. Like, that's not even a you know, questions. So like I, you know, respect to a degree to the movie. It was not my choice for number 4 though. Do you know what my choice was?
I do, but 4? That's because I have the document in front of us, but I don't think our audience does. So what was your number 4th? No.
My number 4 movie was T. West's X.
Is it T or is it Ty?
I thought it was T, but I don't know.
I don't know.
Well,
I thought it was
It may well be Ty. It probably is. There is a track record, as our listeners can probably attest, to me grossly mispronouncing all sorts of things on this show. So
exactly, like mispronouncing. You just No, I'm just kidding.
You know,
that'd be funny if you did, though.
It's been a really long week. I hate saying that to you when you've had COVID this week.
That's fine.
But it's been a really fucking long week, Sean.
It's all right.
What was I talking about? X, the fine film X. About people trying to go make a porno in Texas, and there's some problems. There's all sorts of problems. Just a few, like an alligator, and a couple that has some issues in their relationship, I think.
Just a few. Some
needs that aren't being met, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. It's about filmmaking. It's about aging. It's about sex. It's about intimacy. It's about really, really good suspenseful horror movie sequences that genuinely have you at the edge of your seat and just feeling delighted with however they resolve. It's got some genuinely good performances in it from basically the entire fucking cast. I can't, there's more that I'll say, but I have a feeling you're going to have things to say and we're going to keep talking about this. So I don't want to say everything right now, but very excited for the prequel that's coming out. With Mia Goth. I'm thrilled. I think this is the best T or Ty West film I've ever seen. I've enjoyed most of his other stuff I've seen, and this was this was great.
I'd say it's probably one of the ones that I would rewatch, which I don't think I've ever really rewatched any of his films. Like I enjoyed them. I enjoyed The Innkeepers and
I rewatched House of the Devil.
And House of the Devil, but I haven't
like 10
rewatched
years
any
apart.
of them. Yeah, but I haven't rewatched any of them. I would rewatch this one probably, and I definitely want to watch that prequel. I'm thrilled that they made it at the same time. So, and that they just didn't tell anybody. And then it's like at the end of the film, there's this tease of the prequel.
And it's basically the same film as The Batman.
It's basically the same film. I mean, I think they both like mostly ensemble films. Like they have like characters that are at the center of them, but they've got really good performances across them. You know, you got Mia Goth, you got Jeffrey Wright, both kind of anchoring the casts.
A lot of darkness.
Lots of
like
very dark. Both of them definitely like franchise connected. Like both of them are setting up like a next film. True. So, you know, both, the end of the Batman setting up, they're like, you know, we're going to do the Joker eventually. We got to do the Joker. I don't know if you've seen you can see it on HBO now, but there's the cut scene where there was actually like a scene between Batman and the Joker in it.
I heard about that.
You don't get like a full view of him, but they decided to make him like gross, like really nasty.
You see a little
looking.
Bit of him. You see him briefly in the movie because
in the movie itself. Yeah, you see like chunks of it, but like even in the scene where you see the two of them together, they keep it really like just bits and pieces. But he's like the smile thing is, you know, it's not the cut thing. It's like this is very disturbing looking deformity. And he seems to have burns and stuff on the rest of it. It was gross. Anyway, which also makes it very horror-like, which is like X.
True. I do like what's his face? Like Barry Keogh.
Yeah, Barry Keogh.
Who I like. He was great in Killing of a Sacred Deer. I'm so tired of the Joker.
Same. And I think I did enjoy the idea of making him looking really physically unappealing, though. Like, because the last, 15 years, we've had...
Hot Joker?
Basically.
I mean, I don't think so, but somebody thinks so.
But Joaquin Phoenix is an attractive man.
And
broadly speaking,
people believe Jared Leto. Somebody thought that was a good design.
Somebody thought that was a good design, and he is like by typical normative standards an attractive man. And Heath Ledger's an attractive man, even with the scars on his face. They didn't do that much to him. Like, he's an attractive man. So, I mean, and back in the 80s, like, Jack Nicholson wasn't like the height of his sort of romantic lead or anything like that. But so, you know, like leaning into being like, no, he's supposed to be scary. Let's actually make him like somebody you don't want to look at, I think is an interesting choice. I would still probably pull away if they were like, no, we're going to do like a whole Joker storyline next. I'd still be like, I don't know, guys. Although I do like Matt Reeves, like his Planet of the Apes films were actually pretty good. And I see them. They're worthwhile. Like the first one wasn't his. He picked up
after Tim Burton, right?
Well, there's the Tim Burton one, but then there's that one there. James Franco has this was like movies. 2009 or 2010 or something like that, and so they did this. I think it was called Rise of the Planet of the Apes or something like that.
Sounds right.
And it's basically doing a version of like how do the apes become like super smart, and it's James Franco's fault, because he was trying to cure Alzheimer's. And anyway, I don't think Matt Reeves did the first one, but he did like the next 2 or 3 films, which kind of chart like this conflict between the apes who are getting smarter and humanity, which is sort of dying off and kind of trying to hold on. But they're well done. And they're, as somebody who's judgmental about Planet of the Apes films, because I have a particular fondness for the sort of the original and the and at least one of the original sequels I think is really good. Well, the others I'm like, oh, this is campy and fun, and I'll watch the people in the terrible ape outfits sort of like do their thing. So I'd probably give another one of those a chance. But yeah, they'll both be franchises essentially, even if they both only get like one more film. So, but we'll find out. Yeah.
They both feature heavy prosthetics on young, conventionally attractive actors to transform them. That we could discuss the pros and cons and problematics of that as well. But that's another connection between them now.
Yeah, it's true. Colin Farrell's like prosthetics to make him look like Cobblepot, and he's not really young anymore. But
no, but I was just thinking of Barry Keogh as the Joker.
Oh yeah, there's that one.
Of what you were talking about. Yeah.
But definitely, I think it's arguable that the what's his name? I just said his name. Colin Farrell prosthetics are probably problematic in a similar way to the Mia Goth old lady ones.
Yeah. It was the only commentary was on the young part.
Yes,
that is another. But if I had omitted the young part of my description, and I still think that's an excellent point, and that bolsters my point. Words, what are they? How do we figure out which ones are supposed to come out of our mouths? I don't know anymore. It's been a long week. What was our third favorite? Should we talk about those?
What was your third favorite?
My third favorite?
Yeah.
Well, my third favorite film of 2022 so far is David Cronenberg's Crimes of the Future. And Nicole. I do want to talk about it. But I also, just before we talk about it, I am bursting to know, Sean, what was your third favorite film
Nicole,
of 2022 so far?
I have such a surprise for you, Nicole.
Yeah?
Such a surprise.
Oh my God, I love surprises.
My third favorite film of 2022 was also Crimes of the Future by David Cronenberg.
What? Oh my goodness, who could have foreseen? What? Record scratch. Man, I loved this film.
I really enjoyed the film. It's I think I come to it like really having like some expectations from Cronenberg in terms of this kind of film, and in some ways it felt a little cleaner than I wanted it to be. Like I almost wanted it to be a messier film from him. But I really I liked the film. I liked what it was building on. I liked that it didn't go too deep into explanations, which is great when he does. He just doesn't really go that deep into explanations, and I love that. And so many of the characters were fun. Those repair techs, I would watch like a whole movie just about those repair techs.
They reminded me a little bit, actually, of a character in a current script of yours, a little bit.
Oh, the repair guy?
Actress. The actress in Imago, who has a little bit of a, special talent for violence and takes some glee in certain kinds of violence.
Oh, that character. Yeah.
A bit of her vibe. I did think of her actually watching Crimes of the Future with the two, repair people, like mechanic characters who have an interesting side to them. They were fun. I'd watch them. The organ registry folks and all of that. It's great. Like I honestly, especially today for reasons we discussed earlier, I really appreciate a film right now where it's about, in part, regulating human bodies, right? Mm-hmm. And attempts to do that. I was actually talking to a friend of the show, Ashley Blackwell, yesterday about this movie and why I liked it so much. And part of why I like it is it's a political film in that it is a film with very strong and real resonance about a range of different political issues, but it's not any kind of one-to-one allegory. Mm-hmm. It's not really a polemic. It has a point of view. It's not like David Cronenberg's absolving himself from, I'm just telling a story about some stuff. I don't care about any of it or how it shakes out. Like, he clearly has horses in the race. Yeah. But he also isn't like, here is my statement about how it is. It's not a manifesto. Right. Right. It's a movie. It's what a movie should be, of like, I am interested in these themes. I am compelled by these themes. I'm going to take these themes and play them out in a story. Right. Rather than like writing a speech. And yes, I really appreciated that right now. I really, really did.
What I thought, one thing on that I thought was kind of interesting is I saw a little clip of Kristen Stewart being interviewed about the movie, and she'd apparently asked him, was like, oh, like, did you like, bang this out during quarantine or something, like during COVID? And he's like, apparently he wrote it in the 90s. I'm sure it's been rewritten, but apparently he wrote it in the 90s. And I'm like, yeah, because it's what it's touching on is still very, very, it's more relevant. I'm sure he added a little bit more about the accumulation of plastics being part of what drives people, the mutations. So for people who haven't seen it, like, people in this world of the film are growing new organs that nobody really sure what's up with them, and nobody feels pain anymore. And
very few people do, at least. A couple people still do.
And it's suggested that people accumulated more plastic in their bodies because we have microplastics out there and stuff like that. And so that was ultimately what caused, or may have been what caused the variations to happen. And I mean, I think it was interesting. I think it was also really interesting that they were talking about, people growing these new organs, but they were getting removed before anybody could figure out what they were supposed to do. Right. Except for the people who were keeping them, and figured out that they meant they were actually processing industrial waste with it.
It's a hopeful film, I'm saying.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
No, continue. Sorry, I'm just excited.
No. I just rambled for a little bit. Please feel free to. throw in your 2 cents.
It's one I've actually heard a little bit of criticism of the film that I understand, although I don't agree with, which is from people being like, this feels very 90s, basically. Like, he could have just put this out in the 90s. It's reminiscent of a lot of stuff that was going on in the 90s in terms of discussions about body modification and things like that. And it's true. When I was watching it, I was like, there are ways in which this feels very 90s to me, but that doesn't bother me, because I'm like, unfortunately, so much of stuff that was relevant in the 90s is still relevant today, just even more so. So I don't care that he didn't refresh it more than he did to make it like more forward thinking than it already is. Like, I feel like I need this film right now, so I'm happy with it. And most of the criticism I've heard of it, I just don't relate to at all. Like, it's weird. Yeah, it's Cronenberg. Also, like, I found it, what people talk about less is, it's a very kind of, like I said, hopeful, but also in certain ways very sweet, empathetic.
Yeah.
Film about intimacy.
Yeah.
And for me, I know people have walked out of it or whatever, and like, fine. And I know my barometer is not the same as everyone's, but the hardest part for me to watch of this movie was like the opening scene, which I don't want to spoil for people, but it's not gory. It's just upsetting.
No, it's upsetting.
The gory stuff,
it's pretty tame for him.
It's pretty tame for him. And also, the people experiencing it are not feeling pain.
Yeah. Which
completely changes the meaning of watching someone like getting cut up. I mean, it's on most of the gory stuff we're seeing in this film is basically like on a continuum, on like a BDSM continuum. It's that kind of a context. It's not what I would consider violence.
No.
And I know some audiences may have trouble with that. But for me, so much of the response I heard made just no sense to me as I was watching it, because I was so immediately taken by the world and following the story. And like you said, I really like that he doesn't explain everything. He just drops you in it. There is exposition. You do get like enough chunks of information that you can follow and you get it and all that, but they don't explain like why pain went away or something like that, or how that happened. And we don't need to know that in order to follow the story and accept that that's the case and follow these characters and empathize with them. And, I love this movie. I thought it was fascinating and it made me feel hope. And that's something in really short supply right now. Yeah. And, and also Kristen Stewart, very surprising, delightful comedic performance from her in this.
She's
really enjoyed it.
She's wonderful.
She's so fucking good. She's
really become everybody's
one of my
really
favorites.
good in it. Like,
everybody's good.
It's another one with that as going for it. Cool.
Everyone did a good job in Crimes of the Future. Good job, Absolutely. Crimes of the Future. And now I own it on Vudu, so I can watch it again. And if you want to watch it again, I can give you my login. Not you, listeners. Not anybody, actually. I would never share a login for a streaming service. I would never do that. There's one thing that's funny to me about Crimes of the Future is it caused me to say a thing I never say, which is, this is not a horror movie.
It's really not.
It's really, and like it's horror adjacent. I don't really care. I'm not going to die on this hill, but it's just funny because I'm always the one who's like, everything's a horror movie, big tent horror. And I'm watching this and I was just like, to me, seeing it as a horror movie, and I'm very happy to hear arguments to the contrary, but to me, seeing it as a horror movie kind of undermines the film, because I'm like, this isn't really body horror. It's body horror adjacent. Yeah. But horror is not what this film is trying to stoke in the audience at all. It's like, I was thinking, I'm like, this is more kind of sci-fi noir is maybe what I would call it.
It's closer to genre. Scanners, which is also only really horror adjacent. Scanners has more horror to it, but
yeah, I would consider Scanners horror in a big tent sense because there are these horror aspects that are they are trying to horrify the audience.
Yeah.
You are supposed to be horrified when you see dude's head explode.
Yeah.
Things like that. That's not how
But this doesn't have that, really.
This doesn't have that at all. When you're seeing blood and organs and things like that, it's not horrible.
It's a lot more clinical.
And it's not a film that's generally working on trying to provoke fear or suspense even so much. Like, it's not really a thriller. Really. It's, it's not, and it's not like, and it's funny because obviously, like, it's called a horror movie everywhere because I guess people watch it and they're seeing people cut open and they're like, this is a horror movie because I am seeing blood and organs. But they're not cutting people open to try to horrify or scare you. Like, if you're not able to watch the material because you're too squeamish, I totally get that, but that doesn't make it a horror movie.
Yeah.
That's like saying it's a horror movie if you watch, like, The Operation, a show I used to watch in the 90s, where you could just watch
Yeah, I know the show you're talking
operated
about.
On.
Like, I can't. I think I saw part of that when I was flipping channels at one point, and I was like, I'm not watching this. I don't want to.
It's... I used to watch that show a lot. Anyway,
I believe you. I believe that you would do that. God.
So you can see why Crimes of the Future is like, I'm like, I don't know what people are talking about.
You're like, this is a comedy. What are you talking about? This is a romantic comedy. It borderlines.
It's a little more. It borders that more than horror. Yeah. Anyway, we need to pay bills, don't we?
Yeah.
All of them, huh?
All of them. Well, that was some advertising.
We paid all our bills, thank God. They all got paid. And we have more films to talk about. We have other favorites. Sean, what was your second favorite film of the year?
My second favorite film of the year was X, the Thai or T or Toe or Two West film, X. I went and saw it with our pal Lamar McLean, who
friend of the show.
Yeah, who joined us last year with the other members of the Brothers from Another Planet podcast to talk about what did we talk about? We talked about Parasite and
Surviving the Game.
Surviving the Game. That's the one I was thinking of. So he said, "Hey, do you want to see this movie?" And I said, "Sure, I want to see that movie." I wasn't sure what my plans were for it because I was like, Jess doesn't want to see it, so yeah, I'll go see it with you. So it was, I didn't really know that much about it. Like, one of the things that, broadly speaking, like, I'll see like a little bit about films now or watch a trailer maybe, and then that's it. Like, I kind of don't read up very much on like the films or what's coming up, and I actually am increasingly avoiding it. And so it was really nice to kind of, I was like, oh, this kind of had a, the trailer or what I saw or heard had kind of a classic Texas Chainsaw like vibe to it. And then the film did exactly that. And I think unlike most imitators of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it really, I think, captured like the essence of like what works in the original and what works in like the better imitators. You've got characters that you got like a core character that you can identify pretty quick, that you can pretty well relate to, and then other characters that stand out pretty well. And unlike a lot of horror films that I'll end up watching, sometimes these slasher films of the last maybe 20 years or so, like I don't think there was anybody where I was like, oh, I'm looking forward to this guy dying. Like, it was, I think I liked pretty much everybody, even the ones that I didn't like as much. Like, there was something about most of them where they were enjoyable characters, so it wasn't like, oh, I'm waiting for this guy to die. So, which I appreciated. It's like, because that can be fun too when they do that, but it's not, I think it's not as interesting or compelling for the storytelling to be like, oh yeah, we're gonna give you a bunch of guys that you want to see die, so that you can just enjoy that part. Yeah,
it's more of that's just like the slashers as a amusement park ride but kind of not also not that I'm going to draw these lines in any kind of firm way, but there's a certain kind of thing where it's like, it's a formula. If you enjoy the formula, you know what you're going to get. You're going to go on, you're going to get on the ride, and it's enjoyable. But that's not the same thing as watching a film where you feel like it's nourishing you in some way beyond just giving you a fun theme park ride experience, which I think this is. They feel like real people. Even though people I didn't like particularly, I didn't want to see die, because it felt like seeing a real person, maybe dying, which is harder to take than a cardboard cutout stereotype who's fucking annoying, like we get in at least a lot of slasher films.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, and one of the other things I appreciate is that, I mean, it's partly fueled by the setting, but it's also, like they decided, hey, we're going to make a film and it's going to be about people trying to make a porno film, but they're trying to make, they treated them like what they were, which was independent filmmakers who just happened to be making a film where people were having sex in it. And it also didn't avoid showing people having sex. It wasn't, God. And which gets so tired. It's like, okay, we're going to have people who do this, or we're going to have we're going to make reference to that. Yeah.
Was it really necessary in the movie about filming a porno to see people having sex? I don't know. It felt gratuitous to me.
I'm joking. No, I know you are. I know you are. But
no, I know you know. I know you know. I just want to make sure the listeners know that I'm saying the opposite of what I actually think.
Well, I'm tired. I'm tired of the. I mean, there's definitely instances where things like that are gratuitous, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I'm just gonna say, like most filmmaking is gratuitous in and of itself. Yes. There is no actual, to be real, there is no value to filmmaking beyond, for the most part, what is gratuitous. It is not something you need to live. You can't eat it. You can't breathe it. You can't wear it to keep you warm when it's cold. It is superfluous on its own.
I want, when people talk about gratuitous sex or gratuitous violence, I want them to explain what they mean by that, and then explain why that is a bad thing.
I think it's fair to discuss things when it's exploitative. When we say, well, this is exploitative.
Anytime, yeah.
Well, no. Exactly. You know what I'm saying? It's like criticizing these. It's like, is it exploitative?
Or otherwise harmful. And, sometimes that, for sure. And I think, as we've had plenty of conversations, and we've had plenty of conversations with the actors and actresses that we've worked with, where there were definitely situations that they were put on where somebody was trying to be exploitative, or somebody was being exploitative. And, that I don't support that at all. I don't appreciate that. But in fact, I'd go so far as to say we oppose that, but that's usually when people are making these arguments, they're not talking about the experience for the actors.
No, they're just saying I'm uncomfortable watching this. It's like, okay, then don't watch it.
I'm all for information being available to people who want it about certain kinds of content, so you can I'm fine with letting people know there's a sexual assault scene in this movie. So if you don't want to see that, avoid this movie. I think that's a great thing to do and very reasonable. But that doesn't make the scene in and of itself, good or bad, or should or shouldn't be there, just dependent on whether any individual person wants to see that or not. That's a different question.
And I think...
one that's... One that there can be debate and disagreement on. It's not like we're all going to fall in lockstep on every single instance or anything like that, but I'm getting really tired of this very childish kind of analysis of film that's viewing things like a Sith is the weird phrase that keeps popping into I keep hearing that only a Sith thinks it. I keep fucking hearing that in my head, and I don't know why, but I do know why, because it keeps coming up in life where people are acting like Siths and just viewing things in these weird absolutes, where I'm like, Are we five? What are we doing here? We might disagree. That's fine too. There's all sorts of content in films that reasonable people could be like, I honestly don't think the filmmaker should have put this out there because I feel like it does more harm than good. That's fine, you know, in any given, and I might somebody might say that about a film that I would be like, I think the filmmaker should have put it here because blah, blah, blah. And that's all fine. But like talking about things like sex scenes overall or violence overall, as if it's this homogenous thing that's just a matter of degrees. Like, well, if there's more nudity and the scene goes on longer, then the sex scene is more gratuitous. If the violence goes on longer and there's more gore, then it's more gratuitous or something. And that doesn't. That's not what those words mean.
No, and I think your characterization of childish is very appropriate, because I think that's where we see a good chunk of some of this coming from. Like there's the usual sources, there's the usual Christian right sources, and there's the usual like pearl clutchers, but there's also a lot of young folks who are like coming into their like trying to understand and navigate these and trying to understand like the nuances of exploitation versus like comfort versus what kind of content do I want to consume. And you know, they end up going like, way too many of these young folks, like anything remotely sexual ends up becoming this thing where they're like, oh, well, it's unnecessary, we don't need it. And you know, it's you do need it. You do need it. And the very fact that you're going to react to it this way shows me that not only do you need it, you did need it. You needed to have caught some sort of like sex scene accidentally in a film when you were younger, so that it wouldn't be this, deeply shocking thing for you. You needed to like stay up late when mom and dad were asleep and like watch the R-rated movies you weren't allowed to on cable. Like, instead of your only exposure to anything sexual being like actual porn, like, which I don't have a problem with porn. It's just like they have the hammer of, if there's sex in it, it's porn. And so now if there's sex in anything, it's porn. That's their hammer and nail.
And I mean, it all has to do with things that are like, I think about those really unfortunate comments Billie Eilish made like last fall about porn, if you remember that. Like,
I vaguely recall, but...
And it's like, she was basically talking about how she, started watching porn at a pretty young age, and it gave her a lot of really fucked up ideas about sex and led to her like doing various things that she didn't actually want to do because she just kind of thought that was what you do or whatever. And her takeaway from that is like, porn is bad. My takeaway from that is like, wow, we don't have any fucking sex education in this country now, do we? And parents are definitely not picking up the slack. Because a part of me was like, this sounds to me more like a criticism of your parents than a criticism of porn.
And in her case in particular, like, she was homeschooled, so her parents doubly dropped the ball there.
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't want to take anything away from her talking about her personal experience. I'm not doubting that. It sounds like, yeah, if when I was 12, I started learning about sex by watching whatever porn I found. I mean, when I was 12, you couldn't easily find porn. That's the thing. Right. Like, when I was young, you had to work for your porn. Like, back in the day. But, it is true. And it is a complicated thing that with the internet in most homes, it makes it very easy for young people who don't necessarily yet have the framework to process what they're seeing, to get access to a lot of information that, could be harmful to their development if they're getting it at a time when they also don't have the grounding to be able to contextualize it. That's a real problem. I don't want to pretend that problem doesn't exist. But people want to jump so fast to, well, then we just shouldn't have porn. And I'm like, there's a lot of things we shouldn't have then if this is our standard of if children have completely unregulated access to it, it can harm them. It means we can't have it.
I think
it's breaking my brain, the logic people have.
It's ridiculous, because the thing that we need is the counter narrative. Like, one, we need to improve. We need to improve like what it is, what sex education is in schools. But the other thing is like, movies need to have sex in it. Like, adults have sex. It happens. Like, romantic comedies should have people having sex. Like, they don't have to, like, you know.
If you want to criticize the quality of sex scenes that we have in a lot of movies, that's very fair. But yeah, I agree with you. I think the answer is we have more sex scenes and more diverse sex scenes that.
Yeah.
And more, I'm not saying every sex scene needs to be realistic either, or that the burden is on filmmakers to make things be realistic. But it is true that I grew up seeing very monotonous sex scenes that were, you know, almost always heterosexual, you know, not realistic, but also like unrealistic in very similar ways. So you're seeing the same kind of shit over and over and over again. And I do think that's harmful to a degree, but that's not true only of sex scenes. That's about all the messaging that we are getting and that is being reinforced and policed through the media that we consume in part, you know, and films are a piece of that. They're not all of it, but they're a piece of it. And, you know, did a lot of people get unrealistic expectations about sex from watching Hollywood sex scenes? Yeah, my answer to that is great. Let's have more sex scenes where there's a greater diversity of experience and people. And I'm glad that, for one thing, in sex scenes now, you see a lot more people going down on women than you used to. That used to be phenomenally rare because you'd just get an NC-17 if that happened. Or before that, an X. Like, literally. And there's more of that. I think it's getting better. And I think X is kind of a piece of that. And the one thing I do want to call back to talking about X, just because I would feel remiss if I didn't bring it up, is you saw it in a theater. I saw it at home. I wondered when I watched it at home if I would have actually... I had this very conflicted thing of, on the one hand, I really wish I'd seen it in a theater to have the audience response to a lot of these great moments of just horror filmmaking that would be really nice to have an audience response there for. But I was actually really glad to not have an audience response for all the stuff having to do with the character of the older woman and how horny she is, which is a big part of the plot. I don't want to like spoil the whole movie because I actually really want people to watch this movie. I think it's very good. But when I watched it, and me as someone who reacts to things the way I do, much like we were talking about Crimes of the Future, I wasn't like, when we see a naked old lady, I wasn't like... I'm going to die. I can't believe this is the most hideous thing. You know, that's not my reaction. I actually was very appreciative of the fact that it was a film that, you know, talked about older women being horny, basically, and that was a thing, and that sex is something that at least most people want in some way and is good for them to have. And being sexually frustrated is not a great situation. Even if you're older, like, you don't necessarily just not care about sex anymore when you're older. And I liked all that. I also am aware that it's a film that's very much in a very conventional horror way, trading on an expected, I think, an expected kind of shock value and horror in the audience. And so I just have conflicting feelings about that. I'm not going to throw the movie out because of that. But I did want to mention it.
Well, and one thing I wonder is, as you're saying that, is does the choice to make her not casting an older woman, not casting an actual person to be the one to react to that, or they did cast an actual person, but instead to have like Mia Goth doing double duty and being in heavy makeup for that. You know, is that I don't know if I have a take right now on whether or not that's better or worse, but it does seem like sort of a level of removal away from like, ew, old people are gross.
That's a way of seeing
it. It's still doing it, but it's kind of saying like, okay, we didn't cast like an old person for you to be grossed out by an old person. We put somebody in like heavy prosthetic makeup for you to be grossed out by kind of like a monster, but not really.
Yeah, which is it's just complicated. I don't know if it makes it better or worse. I think it makes it better in some ways to have Mia Goth play that character because it makes it draw an immediate parallel you cannot avoid between the two characters played by Mia Goth.
Right.
Which, without getting into spoilers, I think intentionally drawing that parallel between them is useful in terms of looking at the themes being addressed and discussed in the film. But yeah, I also think that having Mia Goth play her, which I'm not super mad about because then she's going to play her again in the prequel. So on that level, I'm super psyched. Mm-hmm. But it does, like you said, turn that character into a little bit more of a monster, which I don't love. I'm getting really tired of a thing that we all encounter a lot when we watch horror movies and things, and including some that I very much love, where things like age or when we were talking earlier about like the Joker disfigurement of any kind of realistic sort being directly translated to a kind of monstrosity, and that view being encouraged is troubling to me and has real world implications that I don't think are great. But it's not easy to always tease that out directly from, you know, making a film that just engages with the fact that most of us have fears about aging, whatever our age is, and we don't need to pretend that's not there. We don't need to avoid that as a topic. And if we delve into the topic, you're probably going to create stuff that is going to play into and or be perceived as being ageist, unless you're doing the thing I said earlier isn't my favorite, of like writing a speech instead of making a movie. Like if you do something that's very didactic and you're like, I want to make it clear, I don't want anybody to be able to misunderstand my intentions as the filmmaker at any moment. So I'm going to do, what is it? It's in like, you know, don't be a menace while drinking your juice in the hood. I think that's the one where every once in a while a character will like pop in from the side and be like, message, whenever. Like,
I haven't seen that movie, but okay.
You should watch it when there's like a social message and they want to make sure the audience gets that, like, no, there is a message here, you know. And that's, sometimes I appreciate polemical films or didactic films. I'm not saying never, but that's not what I want most of my diet of filmmaking to be, or the only way I want people to engage issues. And I recognize that something like I could watching this with my husband at home, I could make an argument that the filmmaker isn't doing anything to encourage people to see this prosthetic covered elderly woman's body as scary, or her sexuality as being in any way aberrant. I could make that argument, and I think Ty West does have a lot of empathy for Pearl. I don't think he really views her as a monster, but I think it would be naive to pretend he didn't understand how his filmmaking was doing that at the same time that it's doing other things.
Right.
At the same time, I think it's complicated. And I wondered, though, if I had seen it in the theater, if I would have been able to enjoy the film as much, because I think if every time the Pearl character showed up and like gave a whiff of like being horny or naked, the whole audience was like recoiling in horror, that would have impacted my ability to enjoy the film.
Yeah.
So just something I wanted to raise. It is definitely one of my top 5 films of the year. We'll see what happens by the end of 2022, but I would be very surprised if it doesn't end up in my top 10, because there's so much of it that I just love. And overall, I think it's a really well-made movie, but there's this somewhat thorny element to it that I just wanted to raise, because that's what we do here. We talk about things.
You know what else we talk about?
My second favorite film of the year?
Your second favorite film of the year.
My second favorite film of the year. My second favorite film of the year is RRR, the action as they call it, or Rise, Roar, Revolt is, I believe, what those 3 R's stand for. And that is what we see in this film. It is directed by S.S. Rajamouli. It is the first film of his I have seen. I'm definitely going to go and watch some of his earlier films. It's just like a 3-hour-long action epic about people fighting English colonizers in India. It's about like some colonizers kidnapped this girl Molly from a tribe, and they you know, do some nefarious trickery and stuff and end up kidnapping this girl. But unfortunately for them, that tribe has a protector who is a man named Beam, who is played by who plays Beam? I believe NT Rama Rao Jr. NT Rama Rao Jr. plays Beam, and so he is on a mission to try to get this girl back. And at the same time, there is like a guy who is working on the British side as a cop, basically, who is played by Ram Charan. He plays a guy called Raju, as I recall. I believe that's correct. And one day, through some various happenstance, the two of them, even though they're on kind of two different sides of this colonial fight, both see a child who needs rescuing. And then, oh my God, this film was already in gear, but then does it really kick into gear? Because I am telling you, the action sequences in this fucking thing were just some of the best I've ever seen in my entire life. I kept like laughing out loud or just smiling or like just turning to my husband with this like goofy grin on my face because I was just so delighted and surprised by all the stuff happening. And it was nonstop entertainment about this friendship that forms between these two attractive men who nobody can kill, but they've got this conflict, and what's going to happen about the conflict, because they don't actually know everything about each other's backgrounds. And what happens though is you get to see a lot of English colonizers get just fucking absolutely leveled for like 3 hours in the best action sequences you've ever seen in your life, and also get an absolutely touching story of friendship. And also it's a musical. And there's also dance-offs. So it's this is maybe going to be one of my favorite movies all time. I want to rewatch it right away. It's on Netflix. So if you have Netflix access, you can watch it. Like, if you like action movies, if you like musicals, if you like stories of friendship, if you do not like English colonizers, if any of those apply to you, then this is the film for you. I would recommend it to almost anyone. I think you and Jess should watch it. I think you'll both enjoy it.
Yeah, we'll probably end up watching it at some point. I've heard good things. Yeah, we just haven't gotten around to it yet.
It's a good time. And I will say, I wanted to watch it, but I was a little hesitant whenever we discussed it. Because I'm like, it is over 3 hours long, but it felt shorter than like 90-minute movies. Mm-hmm. I watched. Like, it felt full because so much happens, but this is not a movie where you're going to be feeling the need to check your phone because shit just keeps happening and it's all awesome. So, RRR. And it's based on, I believe that the events as depicted in the film are not necessarily super realistic, but the two guys that it's based on were real revolutionaries in the 1920s. So, okay. Cool. FYI, so it's, historical too.
So kids, use it as homework.
Definitely. I had a number one movie this year too.
Did you? What was your number one movie this year?
Oh, it was just like everything. Everywhere, all at once. That was my number one.
Too.
Film. You too?
Oh my God.
Wow.
Maybe it's because it's the best movie of the year.
It is such a good movie. I was anticipating this one. Obviously, this was one that I've been very, very rarely seeing movies in public, as you obviously know, Sean. I don't go to movie theaters generally unless it's a place where there's a masking policy and everyone needs to be masked. Otherwise, it's just, again, I'm trying to delay my second COVID infection because I would like my long COVID to not get worse. Which is likely to happen when I get infected by COVID again. Mm-hmm. But apparently it's my own fault because either I'm making this all up and it's actually totally fine, or I should just never leave my house again. Because really, if I, how irresponsible of me to ever leave the house. This is what I'm getting. But in any event, I sadly waited until it was streaming, so I didn't get to see it until then. And this is a film that there was a lot of buildup for, and because most people I know saw it and loved it, who were my friends at least. Everyone fucking loved it. So I can't say I went into it without expectations. I had pretty high expectations, and it still surpassed them. Mm-hmm. It was a delightful, original movie. I was absolutely enthralled from the first frame, just when you're first getting introduced to this family before we even get into a multiverse or anything very weird, when it's just kind of like, you know, this woman and her husband and kid and their laundromat and family and tax conflicts. I was like, I'll watch this for over 2 hours. No fucking problem. Like, this cast, Are you kidding me? And it had such just a distinct feel from the jump. You're like, oh, I haven't seen this before. Mm-hmm. This is not, nobody else could have made this movie. This definitely has the imprint of the Daniels on it. And I say this as, like, I didn't love Swiss Army Man. I respected it. I enjoyed it, but it just didn't quite click with me in a way where I was like, yes, this is the weirdo movie for me. I was like, good for them. They did a thing. I'm glad. But I didn't love it. It didn't super move me, but this was just absolutely clicked from the very beginning, and I was enthralled the whole way. That I was shocked when I saw RRR, because I was like, this is the only thing that could possibly give Everything Everywhere All at Once a run for its money in terms of best action sequences, because and I don't even want to say which is better. They're completely different approaches. They're both absolutely top tier, excellent. What did you like about it?
I mean, I always enjoy a multiversal story. Like, it's one of those sci-fi like tropes, that and like time travel, that I usually enjoy, even when it's not very good. So I was anticipating it for that reason. Michelle Yeoh is great. So I was really kind of excited about potentially seeing it. My wife was really into it, so we went and saw it, I think, on the opening weekend. And I mean, I enjoy its lean into the potential absurdity, you know, or the potential for absurdity. They say, well, in a multiverse, in an infinite multiverse, there could be, you know, all of these potential things could potentially happen. Anything could happen. And so they said, sure, okay, let's do that. Let's do anything could happen. We'll do lots of stuff that's pretty grounded and makes sense. We'll do some very silly things. Rakakun Tui, or whatever it was, however you said it, however they said it.
Rakakuni, I think.
Rakakuni. Like the fact that it's like, oh, well, your mishearing of something is that there's a universe where that's true, you know, hot dog fingers, stuff like that. The universe where life doesn't exist, but their consciousness exists in rocks. Yep. Which I had seen something about how those were supposed to have like voiceover dialogue, and then they decided to have just the text overlay instead. Those were delightful. Like, it's or the subtitle text, I guess. It touches on like the sort of stuff that I do enjoy about those kinds of stories, while also doing a really good job of staying grounded in, it's a story about familial relationships. It's a story about the choices that you make. And like, I think it did a good job of like going to that place where they get to see, the main character gets to see a version of herself. It's like a potentially ideal version of herself, where she had a better life without making a certain decision. And it didn't then have like sometimes they do that, and then they have like but really, like, there's a secret like bad side to it. It was just like, no, you probably would have had a better life if you'd made this other decision by a certain measure. You wouldn't have had this one thing. Everybody would have been better off in a certain situation. And it like just, it didn't undercut that in a way that a lot of those ways that those stories are approached does. And it stayed with that, you know, what she loses in that is something that does really matter to her, and helps reinforce for her how much it does matter. So I think that it manages to move through that while being like super fun to watch. Again, another movie with wonderful performances from everybody, and
give Michelle Yeoh an Oscar.
Yeah, give her all of them. But and the Stephanie Hsu, I don't know how to pronounce that name.
Sue, I think.
She's delightful. Like I've seen her. Well, she was in this, and I've seen her pop up in a couple of places. I think mostly in. I've seen her the most in. Well, she had that small role in Shang-Chi, and then she's also in Awkwafina's show. Awkwafina is Nora from Queens. She plays a friend of grandma's. She plays an old lady for the most part in that movie.
Oh.
Or in that show, because she's first introduced in flashbacks. And so she plays the young version of the character, and then when they bring in the older version of that character, it's just her in like not very like she's basically just in a white wig, and like a little bit of makeup, but she just ends up playing a friend of grandma, and she's very funny on that as well, and she's very good on that, and it's I think it's just a. Especially because the multiverse, the concept of the multiverse is very much of the moment right now. Like not just Marvel things, of which, we now have at this point 2 Marvel multiverse movies, and they're going to lean into more multiverse stuff, I'm sure.
We've got shows and stuff too. Like they're really like,
That What If show that they did.
Yeah. I haven't watched it, but
they're kind of like that's out there, but then there's also just in terms of like cultural zeitgeist, the people don't shut up about the Mandela effect, and people have said, oh, there was this, and usually one of the explanations is you've shifted to another universe where it's misspelled, where it's spelled differently. It
was fun with the Berenstein Bears thing like 10 years ago. Like it was fun to be like, oh, haha, another universe where it's Berenstein Bears, whatever, but like it's like now people are taking it way too serious. There's too much of it, and I love this. I like a lot of the Marvel multiverse stuff. I liked Into the Spider-Verse. I liked Loki.
Oh, we're getting another one of those.
Which I'm excited. I love Loki. But it's like it also gets really exhausting for me, and a lot of that stuff does not feel as emotionally grounded at all as this. No. It's like the multiverse exists because it's a way to cram more characters and scenarios into movies, and that's not why it was in this. It's like I feel like it's motivated. The Marvel stuff just feels very like a crass commercial calculation, basically, and that's the main motivation for why that's everywhere. And how it's treated from one work to another, like it's treated really well in some of them. I'm not saying people don't ever do good stuff with it, but it's like it kind of seems like a decision was made at a series of meetings by executives that like, oh, we're going to do this because X, Y, Z, not necessarily because it's going to serve each of these individual stories or anything like that. But, it allows us to have like, I don't know, Miles Morales Thor someday or whatever, but hopefully less racist than it was in the comics from what I've heard. I haven't read any of this shit. This is just what I pick up
I saw somebody talking about that.
I was like, ooh. Because at first I'm like, yeah, I want to see Miles Morales Thor. And then I was like, oh, what?
Yeah.
Just what? Why?
I only saw a couple panels.
I know why, racism. But but this they were using the multiverse to really good effect, and it didn't do the thing that my husband complains about a lot, where the stakes start to feel non-existent to him because it's too easy to just like, oh, well, we're going to go to this other one and then we snap our fingers and then everything's okay. And in some Marvel or other stuff that deals with like time travel and multiverses and things like that, sometimes it can
you lose the stakes.
You lose the stakes, and that's not the case here at all, in part because the stakes are specifically about stuff happening within the multiverse that will be horrifically destabilizing. So
it's
I
it's
explained
using
that
it
badly.
for no, you did fine.
You know what I mean, though.
No, that's why I'm saying you did fine. I think it's I think one of the things that it does really well is when you when you bring in the multiverse, or when you bring in time travel as a storytelling device. Like, I mean, there's a couple ways to use both of them that are fine, but when you're using it as a storytelling device, like, one of the most useful things for it is, it's a way to explore the road not traveled and like people's choices.
Yeah.
And this is what this is about. That's what this is about. This is about the choices you make, like the little choice. And I think the great thing about this is that thematically, the film is about a relatively speaking small problem between family members, between human beings, and the thing is it's using the multiverse and saying like little things make big changes in the multiverse. Like there's hugely different universes because you made one slightly different decision, and I think that's really sort of what can be so great about that as a storytelling device. Yes, in a lot of like the big budget blockbuster things, it's a little bit more about like, hey, let's try to do like just different versions of the same, we want to see different versions of the same thing, or we want to be able to bring in, different characters, like which is mostly what like the Doctor Strange one and the Spider-Man and the Spider-Man No Way Home and Spider-Man like Into the Spider-Verse, and when Into the Spider-Verse 2 comes out, like they're really like they're like, we want to have fun with what if the character's different, what if there's an alligator Loki or a crocodile Loki. I don't remember if it's an alligator or crocodile, like, and those are fun, and that's really it. Like,
it's just like Into the Spider-Verse was so refreshing when it came out. But what is troubling is it's like, wow, Into the Spider-Verse was really great. Let's do a kind of shittier version of that a lot and not do many other things. I'm not saying they're not doing other things, but it's just kind of like enough. Like, I love Into the Spider-Verse. I love the first Loki series. I'll watch the second Loki series, but I might be more likely to watch more Marvel stuff than I do if I didn't feel like it was all multiverse and not bringing more into it. It seems like it's diminishing returns to me as somebody who hasn't watched half the movies you just talked about. So, take my opinion with a grain of salt. It's just,
yeah. I mean, they're leaning into some of that stuff with a few of their franchises, and I think it's going to get tiresome, or it has gotten tiresome for some folks already, which is completely reasonable reaction to that. I think that I think that the stories and the characters are can be fun and interesting, but the truth is like, not to talk too much about Marvel stuff while we're talking about this movie, but
it's like, not either of our none of these films were none of these on our top 5 at all.
But it is the topic, it is playing in the same playground, and I think the thing is that the Marvel films have now become a lot more, and I think you and I may have talked about this before. They're a lot more for people like me now, who are like, I have like a deep, like, even from stuff that I haven't read, and I've read a lot of it. I'll just like Wikipedia, like skimming, like, a lot of it is for like somebody like me who's like, oh, they're doing this, or oh, they're referencing that. Not as sort of widely accessible. It's a lot more for their like, we've got our like audience of like Marvel people who want to watch all the Marvel stuff, and we've got our audience of people who've read a lot of the Marvel stuff, and we probably have a little bit of other people too who are curious and interested, but they're not as concerned about selling to those people, so they're going to lean harder into like the fan stuff. And I do think that hurts the storytelling. Like, I do think that both No Way Home and the Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness are pretty low, probably in the end, on my on my sort of the films that come out of that group that I enjoy. Like, I just felt like the storytelling wasn't really there. I appreciated what they were doing for sort of larger story arcs and stuff, but they're also hitting the saturation point where comic book movies are now becoming like reading comic books, where you kind of do have to know what everything else is to really enjoy it. And you do kind of have to have watched, in the comic books now, you have to have read like tons of different things or cross across a bunch of different things to really get everything that's going on in any one story, which is a pain in the ass.
And I mean, it's okay if you don't get everything. Like, I watched Ragnarok with director's commentary last week, which helped me see, like, for example, like all sorts of references in that film that I didn't get because it's to like other Marvel stuff. Yeah. And it's all there. But you don't have to get that to be able to watch that film. You don't even have to have seen the other Thor movies or any of the Avengers movies.
No.
To really. Like, even though tons of stuff that happens in other Marvel films plays out in Thor Ragnarok or is referenced in Thor Ragnarok. So it's deeply embedded in all that. And I would imagine, if you're getting all the references and all the little things in the backgrounds, it's like, oh, it's that character. Oh, it's that weapon. Oh, that this character's using this other character's weapon. And that, that like, it's probably really gratifying and fun. There's tons of fan servicey stuff in it, but it also succeeds as a complete story in and of itself. And I'm not making a rule that films have to. Like, it's fine if there's like stuff that exists primarily as connective tissue between other stories that's primarily for Marvel fans and they're going to appreciate that stuff. Like, I'm not even saying that's bad or anything like that. It's just not for me.
Exactly. And I think we're hitting that point with those more and more. And I think Marvel knows that, and honestly is like, we're fine with that. We have enough people for that, and to sustain ourselves for that. And
enough other people will watch it. I think you're right that they're not necessarily aiming at what the demographic that's actually going to end up making up the majority of their audience. I would assume most people who see these films and shows don't actually have this depth of knowledge. I'm sure a ton of them do. I'm not saying it's not a sizable minority. Maybe it's like 40-60 or something even, but like most people who watch these films, they don't have that depth of knowledge. It's just because superhero films have become the dominant form of entertainment. So people see it because it's the big new movie that's out. And most people in this country have probably seen at least some of the Marvel films. You'll be able to like watch the fucking movie. You might not appreciate or enjoy some of the stuff that's the most potentially gratifying stuff in it, but you're not going to be like, I can't follow this, I assume.
Exactly. And I think that, and what they're doing with the multiversal stuff, I mean, I think they saw Into the Spider-Verse and they were like, and it's just out there, people are writing stories about it. People are talking about it. It's something that people
we're either going to escape to Mars or we're going to escape to another fucking, entire universe. Those seem to be people's options right now because people have largely thrown up their hands about making the Earth we're on livable for much longer. So people are just fantasizing about their escape hatches. Yeah. I think is a big part of it.
And so this film is coming in there with that, but not in Everything Everywhere All at Once is coming in there with that. But I think it's coming not from like, oh, Marvel and everybody, and there's these big tent poles that are doing multiverse things. I think it's just like people are on the multiverse thing. I think it's just people kind of wish they could go back and change certain, you can see. You just look at the last, couple decades and you're like, if this one thing was different, I wonder how the world would be different. If one choice was made differently, because I think a lot of people are just unhappy with, regardless of which side of what conversation we're on. I think the majority of people are unhappy with the way that the world is.
Yeah.
And and people who disagree wildly about fundamental concepts are both unhappy with the way that the world is right now. And I think
it's not really resonates. Serving that many people very well. No. And even the people it is serving well, relatively speaking, are still probably unhappy because those people always want more.
Yeah.
So
there's
that.
So I think this really speaks to a lot of that.
Yeah, and it's there's a lot in this that's that connects to other films we've talked about, like maybe most obviously Seeing Red, Turning Red, whatever that movie's
Turning
called.
Red.
Turning Red, right? I mean, you're talking about, specifically Asian families and parent-child relationships and conflicts, right? That are kind of both very specific, but it's another example of like getting to the universal through the specific. Like I know it's certainly, I'm sure both of those films might resonate differently, you know, if you're Asian, if you're the child of immigrants, things that are not my case. And but it's still relevant, you know, even if it's not like as specifically exactly your experience, there are still definitely elements of it that resonate with your experience, with my experience. I've related heavily to both of these movies, and I think it's nice that we are getting, nice is a bad word for it, I think it is good that we are getting some of these stories that are more nuanced and thorny in various ways coming out now.
I think it's great, and I think, as you said, the telling a universal story by telling something very personal and specific. I think that's something that we're in a nice sort of space right now where we're seeing a little bit more of that, as opposed to people trying really hard to tell, like, oh, I'm trying to tell a universal story, blah blah blah, and they make things super bland and empty because, you know, if you make it too specific, then people can't relate to it. No, you make it more specific. Yeah. And then you have detail, and people relate to the detail. They don't relate to all the details because they miss some of them. Like I'm sure I missed a million things in both these movies that are specific details. Sure. But I related to plenty of the relationships, and you know, I think we had a text conversation at one point about people having a real hard time with Michelle Yeoh's character in this film. And I was like, okay, but like, yeah, she's unpleasant. And, you know, I think we can both relate to family members who can be blunt or unpleasant, or
sometimes we are those family members, maybe.
Exactly. I wasn't going to say it, but I was going to say, Nicole, you're the Michelle Yeoh. But I think that, like, also, you know, people who say, oh, I can't relate to the, why is she like that, or she's terrible, blah 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 blah. I'm like, okay,
have they stepped outside? She's a real person.
Yeah, she's a real person, and also I'm like, okay, but like, have you ever listened to anybody else talk about their parents? Like anybody who doesn't look like you? Because when I saw that and she was talking, I was like, you know, this reminds me of, you know, not anything specific, but like the general like idea behind when, like back in the 90s when I was watching like on Comedy Central, like Michelle Yeoh, like not Michelle Yeoh. I'm fixated on Michelle Yeoh. What's her name? Margaret Cho, because it started with an M, like a Margaret Cho.
Who is in my number 5 pick, Fire Island.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I saw it in the trailer.
She's so good in it. She's great.
She's wonderful in everything I've seen her in. But I remember back in the late 90s, early 2000s, like watching, like she'd have like a half-hour stand-up thing on Comedy Central that they repeated a lot, and I'd watch it a bunch because I watched a bunch of stand-up back then. And like I was like, what I remember watching this, I was like, oh, this kind of reminds me of like the way that she would joke about her parents. And so I was like, okay, so like this is kind of interrelate, like, you know, that other you know, experience other than my own. And I'm just like, you need I think when people look at this and they say, oh, I don't get it, or I can't relate, or, you know, why is she so mean? I'm like, you need to listen to other people's stories. You need to listen to other people tell their stories, and then you will recognize what this is.
Also, I'm sure they've got people in their fucking families who are fucking unpleasant people, maybe in different ways. Yeah, but it's similar to what we were talking about before about gratuitous sex and violence. And like, what does that mean? And people kind of wanting films to come with instructions, very, very clear instructions of how you are supposed to interpret every single thing that you might see or hear.
Yeah.
Over the course of the film, and whether it's good or bad.
Yeah. I think it's much more valuable to like when people say like, oh, well, you know, she's mean or blah, blah, blah. It's like, you need to learn to talk to listen to other people's stories. You need to really look at why are you missing that? And it's the same with Turning Red too. It's like, why are you missing that? Not that you can't relate to it, but why can't you relate to it? And you need to fix that about yourself. Yeah.
And honestly, it's kind of interesting. I was just thinking about Turning Red and Everything Everywhere All at Once before you brought it back to Turning Red, because of a main difference between these two films that do touch on some shared themes, which is that one of them's for kids and one of them's for adults. Mm-hmm. And thus they handle their themes differently. Licorice Pizza is a movie for adults. It's rated R. Yeah. If that doesn't mean young people won't see it, and I don't want to pretend that or whatever, but it is not being marketed to kids. It is not being marketed to teenagers. It is being marketed to art house adult fucking audiences who should be able to see a movie and then have a discussion about the themes that isn't reduced to like, well, this film didn't give me an instruction guide to how I was supposed to interpret it, which is brings us back to actually our shared film in the number 3 position, which is so much of what I love so much about Crimes of the Future is it's not telling you how you're supposed to feel about stuff, which is, I think, part of why it's just so disorienting to certain audiences, and they were just unable to find their way into it at all. I guess if you're more horrified than I am by some of the themes in it, for example, like I'm not horrified by people cutting each other up for pleasure. You know, like that's not gonna like make me clutch my pearls. I'm not gonna pearl clutch about the idea of people otherwise modifying their bodies. You know, I'm clearly not going to pearl clutch about surgery either, as, you know, speaking of the operation. But I think like some people, and it's like you said earlier about if all you have is a hammer, everything's a nail. I think you said that, you know, for a lot of people watching this, they're not able, I'm guessing, to see it as anything but a horror movie. Because they're like, this is so scary. This is a future where people are choosing to do DIY operations on themselves. This is horrifying. And the film's perspective isn't really that it's horrifying. The film's perspective is that it's interesting, I think. And it's a film that is interested in a lot of the themes. And that's why I called it like sci-fi noir, because it's a very noir kind of setup where there aren't exactly good guys and bad guys. There are people who do good things and people who do bad things. But none of the characters are really like, here's the hero to root for.
Yeah.
At all.
I mean, I would say that, what's his name?
Viggo Mortensen?
Character. Viggo Mortensen's character is very much not to spoil anything for anybody, but I will say that because of certain revelations that happen about halfway through the film, he's definitely would fall under the, your standard definition of a noir,
right?
Hero. Yeah. Like
completely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. And in general, the way that he's the protagonist and at various points there are antagonists and stuff, but it's not so much about individual people who are heroes and villains. And again, the film is not telling you what to think. Because I follow David Cronenberg and there's evidence in the film as well, you know, I have some guesses about what his opinions are. On some of the material. And I think he's trying to put forth some ideas that are actually useful as we move into the future for us all to think about and consider. And I think it's sad that...
Eat toxic waste.
What's that?
Eat toxic waste. Eat it.
Yeah.
Eat the toxic waste.
Eat
industrial waste.
Eat industrial waste. Get on it. I mean, otherwise we're going to have to like... figure out how to jump dimensions in the multiverse or whatever, because God knows Elon Musk isn't getting us to Mars. So, we got to start. We need something. David Cronenberg's the only one with a plan. Honestly, I'm all for the Crimes of the Future platform. Let's do it. Great. I'm not even kidding. Not even kidding.
Grow your own new organs.
Do it.
All right, everybody.
The potential's endless.
All right, everybody.
They do say in Crimes in the Future that part of what makes him an artist is arguably that his will to continue to grow more organs is a piece of why he does.
It was interesting when they had that conversation. Is it really art? Because like you're just
I loved it.
Like, yeah,
so fucking funny. It's a funny movie, guys. Crimes of the Future is fucking funny. Like I laughed quite a few times at it. It is balm for my soul, honestly.
Yeah. And,
Crimes of the Future.
Yeah. Well, we should
God bless
wrap
David
up, shouldn't
Cronenberg. Yeah, we should. So thank you, David Cronenberg, for decades of everything. Please keep making movies. I needed this one this year, so thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you to the Daniels. Thank you to T or Ty West. Thank you to Joel Kim Booster. As well as I also wanted to thank Andrew On, because I think I said Fire Island was Joel Kim Booster's film, and he does star in it, and he did write it, but he did not direct it. Andrew On directed it. And also thank you to S.S. Rajamouli, who directed RRR. Thank you to W. Kamau Bell for your excellent documentary and other fine works. Who did I forget? I'm not going to thank Matt Reeves, but you can if you want.
Thanks, Matt Reeves. Thank you.
Thank you, whoever directed Turning Red. I don't remember.
I was just pulling it back up. I just like closed my thing that showed it, and it was Domi Shi. So thank you, Domi Shi.
And thank you, David Coverdale.
And David Coverdale.
Always. No reason is just subscribe to our Patreon. You'll know the reason.
You'll probably, yeah. You gotta have to watch the video. Other than the obvious reasons, we would thank David Coverdale.
Yeah, I mean it's obvious, and also when you finish listening to this podcast, go donate to an abortion fund, and or go volunteer at an abortion fund,
abort some babies.
Abort some babies.
Go do that.
Share some information about how this is serious. Actually, share some information about how babies can be not babies, how fucking fetuses can be aborted. Let's share that fucking information. There's a lot of ways, and let's keep talking about it. Whether it's relevant to the fucking celluloid mirror or not, don't give a shit. No. It's the hell we're living in.
It's relevant. It's relevant to the life. Doesn't have to be relevant, So
it's relevant to us. It's relevant to us, and we're the ones fucking talking. So go.
Exactly. We're very pro-abortion. So
we are very pro-abortion. No problem saying
pro-abortion. No.
I know you are. Hey, I remember having a conversation with you about it actually fairly early in our friendship, where we were on a flight, and I think it was early in the morning, and you were talking about like, I don't give a shit what the reason is. Whatever reason, it's great. Abortion is the best. I don't like it when people say like, oh, I'm against abortion, but I'm in favor of choice. No, I'm for abortion. Abortion's great. And I was like, I agree. I also think abortion's great.
have as many as you want. Yeah. All right. Well,
go
everybody
abortion.
have a better day.
Have a better day. Don't get COVID. Help people get abortions. Talk to you soon.
We'll talk to you soon. We'll be back with a regular episode in 2 weeks.
We'll be back with it real soon. Yeah, 2 weeks. Exactly. 2 weeks. Yay, bye.
Yeah, in 2 weeks. Bye.
The Celluloid Mirror is a 4 Mile Circus production hosted by Nicole Solomon, that's me, and Sean Mannion. Our theme music is Twisted by Kevin MacLeod. You can hear more from Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.filmmusic.io. Please take a few minutes to rate and review The Celluloid Mirror on your podcast platform of choice. It really helps other people discover the show. And if you have questions or comments about what you heard on the show or suggestions for future episodes, please email us at info@4milecircus.com or seek us out on social media. We are at 4 Mile Circus on Twitter and Instagram. Want more Celluloid Mirror and more from me and Sean? Well, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/4milecircus, where you will get early access to episodes of The Celluloid Mirror, as well as uncut video of our recording sessions featuring stuff that doesn't make it to the final episodes, and access to our Discord server, Patreon-only events, and so very much more. To learn more about everything we do, visit us at 4milecircus.com.
I ended up in that hall of mirrors. There was another girl. She looked like me. Exactly like me.
Can you come with me, my dreams?
That'll do, baby.
What happens when the story dies? The evil is set free.
I have to return some videotapes.